Have you ever wondered what the role of a project manager and a test manager is, particularly in an IT project, and how the two of them working together in collaboration can really lead to a successful implementation? Well, if you've wondered and you want to know more, we're here today to talk to Pilar Gonzalez, who is an expert in test management. And welcome to the program, Pilar. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you so much. How are yourself?
Excellent. I'm good, and I'm so pleased to have you because this is one of those subjects I think people don't really talk about.
No,
They don't realize how important this is.
absolutely. Yes, it's very important for a test lead, test manager to collaborate hand in hand with a project manager or program manager.
Yeah, exactly. So just before we start, this is being recorded. It'll go on the YouTube channel, and for everyone watching, give us a thumbs up and subscribe down below so that you can get more of these webinars. We love doing them. So, Pilar, can you just tell us quickly a little bit about yourself? You're very experienced in this sort of area.
Well, I've been working in the testing area for about 20 years. I started in Chile in the banking sector, always in banking, and then I moved to Australia, and I continued doing testing in diverse industries as asset management, ERP, university education sector, retail, and now I'm gonna start shortly in the banking sector again.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and we talked about this before this session. It's really important to do testing in everything, but particularly in areas like science, medical, and banking, because
Yes.
you can't afford to make a mistake.
No, absolutely not, especially when you are dealing with people's money
Yeah.
and health.
And health, exactly. Now, we talked a little bit about when the testing comes into the project. And for me as a program manager, I like to, if I'm doing a integration type project or some sort of technology project, when I start the project planning and do my project strategy, I always like to include what I'm going to do for testing or how that testing is going to play out over the course of the program. And particularly in business transformation, it's likely to be a 3-year rollout of the project. But testing's not always static. People seem to think it's only ever to come onto the radar at the end, but that's not right, is it?
Absolutely not. The earlier, the better, because
Mm,
if you are an experienced test analyst, because every test manager, every test lead is a test analyst, needs to
mm,
have those skills. The most assertive questions that you make at the beginning will have a big and huge impact throughout the project. It's gonna help yourself as a test lead to plan better, to
mm.
allocate resources, and help your project manager, your program manager, to help you with those resources, because you need to go and ask your project manager, oh, hey, I need 3 or 4 testers. We're going to need 3 or 4 testers because you are giving me this amount span of time.
Yeah,
So you need to have this discussion with your project manager at the beginning. And if you make the right questions, again, allocate resources better,
yeah,
then what to test, how many environments you're going to need, and all that sort of question that start to pile up at the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
And then you can um, place it in your schedule accordingly, because there are things in testing that cannot start until something else
Yes,
is
exactly.
previously executed. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And all that sort of things, yeah, they need a big discussion at the beginning, and that discussion in many places in these days is not happening. You get into the project,
Yeah,
you are introduced into the project at the half or at the end, and
that's right.
and you're
Yeah.
rushing to get or gather all that information,
Yeah.
and that you're supposed to have at the beginning. And yes, unfortunately, yeah, that is a very, very bad practice that is impacting most of the software development these days.
Yeah. Look, and I think as a project manager, if I look back on some of the work that I've done in the finance and banking industry, I probably haven't had the test manager right at the start, but I know enough about testing myself or the components I need to put into the plan
Correct.
to make sure I've got it covered. So then when I've got business analysts, they're also thinking in terms of the testing in the future. We're thinking about the time frames of what testing is going to look like in the future. But then, yes, it's often an afterthought almost that, oh, yeah, we need a test manager. And by then it's almost too late. And the other thing that I find is many stakeholders and organisations don't put the value in the testing that's actually required, the duration, the amount of time, the amount of resources that's required. So typically in a bank that's going to happen. But can you just tell me a little bit about what you were talking about before, asking the right questions? Once you get on board, say that you haven't started at the start and the business analysis has all been done, what sort of questions would you be asking, and who would you be asking those of? I know you mentioned the project manager, but are there others?
Yeah, about the system, it's like are there going to be any integrations?
Yep.
Are you gonna migrate data? That is a huge one.
Yes. Huge.
Usually people forget data
Yeah.
migrations and integrations. Eh, how many integrations? How
Yeah.
many we want to have? Is your system is the audience of your software is going to be people with disabilities? Then accessibility testing,
Yes.
important
Yes.
thing that many people forget. Accessibility testing. Are you having students? Your audience are students? What background are your students? Oh, all from different countries. Again, accessibility test.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
with the questions you start to make, to put in place at the beginning, you realize,
Yep.
how many type of testings I'm gonna need. I'm gonna
Yep.
need yeah, UX UI, accessibility, data migration, validation,
Yep.
integration,
Integration.
parallel testing. Let's
Yep.
say you are gonna implement a payroll system.
Exactly.
You
Mm-hmm.
can, when you implement a payroll system, you can switch off straight away your old implement
True.
payroll system. So
Yep.
there is a need of execution of parallel testing,
Mm-hmm.
right? If the two payroll
Yeah.
systems are behaving in the same way, because that is what we need is, again,
Mm-hmm.
people's money, your employees' money when it's a payroll system. And we need to make sure that the new system in place is behaving accordingly. So that is briefly the type of questions that you start to make at the beginning, and that needs to be placed those questions very early, because
Yeah.
that those questions upon the answers is going to give you an idea how to allocate resources, environments again, time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
those sort of things. So
Yeah, it's
how
big, and
important?
people don't realize all of that. And also, as you were talking, it's how many stakeholders, how many users are going to be
Correct.
involved across what parts of the business. It's not just your project, and you mentioned that before. If your project manager's not on the ball and understanding what other projects are dependent or happening around you, then testing's likely to be impacted. I don't know about in your experience, but often in my experience, I've gone into a project to recover it, and they've got caught up in testing because the project manager and the stakeholders have not considered the backlog of testing or the backlog of new production items that are scheduled to go, holding up testing. Um, is that something that you've found before, that they just don't? They just don't get it.
No, don't get it. And they only think in SIT testing, system
True.
integration testing, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't think in anything else because of time constraint or just
Yeah.
a knowledge problem that they don't know much about testing, just
Yeah.
restricted to SIT type of testing. That's it. And only the happy path. Only the happy path.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly right. I know in the old days when we were building, relational databases, which was a big thing. This is a long time ago, right?
Yep.
Um, we used to do performance testing as well on those, just on the big
Correct.
databases. And I
Performance,
don't hear
security.
about exactly validation testing, verification validation. Was everything working? Were all the policies right? There's a lot in it, and particularly when it's a big project or an enterprise class project, there's a lot of considerations. So, in talking about all of this, the project manager is integral in understanding the test cycle and what sort of
Correct.
things can happen. I don't know that that's actually very common out there in project land. The change manager is also quite integral in preparing for the test scenario, aren't they? Well, how
Yes.
soon should they be doing that, do you think?
If we are talking about the collaboration with the project manager, the change
Yeah,
manager, sorry, between the three, test manager, change manager, and project manager, they need to work together from the beginning because the
yeah,
change manager needs to be aware of what is changing and if what is changing is correctly tested.
yes,
It's the
exactly.
responsibility of the change manager to make sure that the test lead is
Yeah,
doing the work.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And yeah, and just while we're talking about change managers, so I'm talking as you are about organizational change managers, and not this doesn't so much happen now, but 15 years ago, you'd say change manager, and there was the organizational change manager, there was the project change manager who was in charge of on big projects the scope
hmm
changes, and then there was the configuration or release manager. And I would always say to people, now, which change are you talking about? And very often they were talking about release management or the configuration management changes, which again impact testing. And
yes,
you sort of highlighted this a little bit before. That may not even be happening on your project. It's out there somewhere in BAU somewhere, configuration and new releases that are also being tested. So how does the test manager sort of foresee these things? Is it just experience?
it's just yeah, experience plays a lot in here. But
Yeah,
if you are not taught it, you gonna skip all the all what it has to do with configuration, let's say.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's a big part of your project. In any implementation, there is always configuration playing a
yeah,
part,
yeah.
and yeah, that is ignored most of the time. And when you start to gather the configuration, do you know who does that these days in especially in agile?
No,
Usually the VA, and usually
yeah.
even let's say when they don't have VA, they put the project manager to do it.
They
And
put the who? Who does it?
project manager sometimes.
Oh yes, no, 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 no.
And you start to rely in not very accurate information in regards of configuration, and there is a
Yeah,
lot of requirements that are leading to that particular configuration, and
yeah.
configuration is a thing itself.
It is a thing itself. It's
And
absolutely a thing itself.
yeah, and plays such an important role, especially in testing, because if we don't have that configuration well set up or well defined, also what we need to uh, set up in this new system that we are implementing. Oh yeah, no, we don't have idea, so we need to find out during testing that. is the current scenario in most of the project, unfortunately. If
Yeah,
you don't
I
have
know.
the, let's say, configuration well set up by the VA, well defined by the VA through this, the requirements, is a lost battle, and you're gonna be rushing. You're gonna put extra stress in the project, and usually during the testing um, phase.
Yeah,
In
that's what
agile,
happens.
unfortunately, yeah, that is skip. Sometimes people forget, and there is no time because the time frame of the sprints are so short
Yeah.
that not many people consider. Oh, configuration. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right, configuration. So do we have something on that? And the VA, there is no VA. There is only a project manager. Ah, yeah, the project manager sometimes. Oh, let's leave the configuration part to the developers. Even the developers end up playing the role of a VA.
No, and it's almost like the developers are checking their own work,
Yes,
which is not a thing. I'm just going back to you were talking about the requirements. There is a thing in project management called the requirements traceability matrix.
yes.
You know, I rarely ever see one of those.
I haven't
And
seen one in years.
in years, I remember the last time I did a project in government was a big project.
Yep.
So it would have been about 2018. We had a requirements traceability matrix because things started to get out of hand with the amount of stakeholders that we had. So we put it all into the matrix and then started to strip away what technology we had, um, what were the requirements, what did it match to in terms of what the BAs had done and what our deliverables had done. And I remember then people then in my team going, "Wow, this is like a really good thing to do." I thought, okay,
My
sure,
God.
you know, this is project management. But you sort of touched a little bit on agile, right? And you and I have worked together, and we both worked in agile environments, and you know they're an interesting environment that have their own intricacies and certainly they're building things and they're testing them as they're going. But in bigger projects or bigger portfolios, even where an organization's got maybe 5 projects going at the same time, each with a software component that's being done agile or not, um, that all can collide and hold things up, can't it? And in your experience, how effective is that agile testing before it gets to your final testing that we're going to do before we put it on the test environment to load it onto a platform?
How effective is testing in agile
Yeah,
prior to put it in test environment?
yeah,
Not much effective because it's mostly not done.
no,
Usually in some companies, I've seen it in some companies, there is a
yeah,
minimum unit testing put in place,
yes,
right?
yes,
Sometimes, not always, because there is a constraint in most of the companies, time, little sprints. So the developers are rushing. I feel sorry sometimes for the developers.
yeah,
They have to complete tasks during the sprints in a very, very short amount of time. They are
yeah,
requested to complete tickets in, let's say,
yeah,
a week.
yeah, yeah,
And they don't have time for unit testing. And when I've seen unit testing, yes, it's the essential testing that needs to be done. And I appreciate that. Me as as a test analyst, test lead, I really
mm,
appreciate that because when it's deployed to a test environment, right?
yeah,
Has a minimum amount of testing uh, in each of the components, let's say.
yeah,
So that makes a little bit easier my work as a tester. A little
yeah,
bit
right,
easier because I don't have to go through the I don't have to put back the a task or a story or because some essential unit testing is failing. So
yeah,
that allows me to move forward. You know what I mean? And yeah, but there are places on where you don't have nothing of that.
No, nothing. Or some of the agile teams are only got 4 or 5 people in them and they're all testing each other's work.
Correct. They usually they put the developers to test
That's right.
the developers, and will be very useful when that is up to the knowledge of the test analyst.
Yeah,
It will be very useful to put the test analyst help the developer to set up some unit testing.
yeah,
For that, for the unit testing, you can write some test scenarios, like a unit testing test cases,
yeah,
and handle that to the developer and get the developer to set up some unit testing. But for that, you need time.
yeah,
And I see
yes,
that a little bit impossible these days with the short sprints that the companies
yeah.
are
They're
introducing.
short sprints. Yeah, I think in the way that I've done it before, at a higher level, I'm looking at what I think are the test scenarios. So I have my deliverables, when I'm
Mhm.
building the program plan, right? I
Yep.
have my deliverables, my outcomes. And for each deliverable or bunch of deliverables, and sometimes for me it's a project because I'm managing a program,
Hmm.
I can say and document what I think the test scenario should be. So it's almost like doing a case study. We're coming from here. This is what we're going to deliver, and this is what we think the outcome should be. And I might only have 5 or 6 of those at the start when I'm doing my project planning, and that sort of allows everybody to know um, there's going to be testing on this later. And I don't particularly know how we're going to test that at the moment. And I don't know exactly when we're going to test it at the moment, or even if it's required. But stakeholders, this is the sort of stuff that we're going to have to test in some point in the project.
Yeah.
And I think what you and I are saying is we're not seeing that with project managers out there in the field. They're not giving that information out early enough. And it's also throughout the project. So every time we finish a phase, even if there was no testing. So say we were doing a requirements gathering phase, we still want to go, okay, that's really good. We've got these requirements. These are the sort of scenarios. Then we might go into design, if it's an IT thing. And I'm talking more waterfall now. I'm not talking so much agile, but it still works the same.
Yeah.
Um, in a way, it's like, well, what do we think we're going to have to test? We may still not have the test manager on board yet in a lot of scenarios. And I've worked in places where I have not got a test manager on until, just weeks before we're going into testing,
Oh my God. Yeah, no,
which
that's
is too
really bad.
late. It's
Yeah.
really bad. Hence the requirements traceability matrix on that example that I gave you. You can only do so much as a project manager because it's not your core skill. Test management is not my core skill,
No.
but it's our core skill as project managers to be aware of everything, all the components on the project that are likely, and to keep communicating and monitoring all of that. Um, Now, is the project manager's role helpful in UAT testing, for example, or is that more to do with the BAs, the change people, and the test manager?
You as a test manager, you need to be aware that you are in a test lead, let's say test
Yeah,
lead in a project, let's say waterfall or not.
yeah,
Um, you need to be in charge of the UAT because you are the one responsible for the testing of the project in all
yeah,
the phases.
yeah,
And you need to coordinate. You need to, it's a very good opportunity to work with your change manager
yeah,
in UAT. And
yeah,
I think it's enough for the test lead and change manager to work together and keep always your project manager informed.
informed.
Always all the
Yeah,
activities, milestones during the UAT phase,
yeah,
because you need to prepare the test cases as a test lead,
yeah,
communicate that effectively to your users. This is what we're going to test. And also, the project manager should be always on top of make sure that the users are aware of the requirements. You don't
Yes.
want to get to the UAT and get your
Yep.
users, what are the requirements? Oh my
I
God, I've
know. I
seen that
know.
several times.
Oh no. No.
It's just super bad, super bad. I've seen
Super
that
bad.
several times that they are not aware of the requirements. And so who is verifying that? Because should be the project manager or the project
Yep.
coordinator if you have
Yep.
one. So make sure
Yep.
that you're signing off periodically
Yep.
the requirements, because I understand sometimes in project you don't produce all the requirements at once. You
Yep.
go through phases. Let's say your
Yeah,
project has
absolutely.
different phases, and
Yeah.
yeah, to make sure there is a consecutive sign off of
Yeah.
all the requirement for all the phases, so you don't get surprises during your UIT. You want your UIT as smooth as possible.
Smooth as possible. And
Yeah,
look, these things can be done if you think about it up front and you communicate with everyone, and have realistic timeframes in your schedule.
yeah,
So often the sponsor at the end of you're getting towards the end of the project and they just want to squeeze testing. They want to squeeze it right down. And I've
absolutely.
had to fight tooth and nail so many times because they don't understand how long testing actually takes and why it takes that length of time. That's why, again, the project manager's got to set this up at the start and keep talking about it by saying, this is what we're going to test. This is how long I think that piece of string is. And then we have people in agile environments going, oh, yeah, but we've tested all that. We do testing. We
And that is the other thing. They want to test. No, we tested ourselves
oh,
during
we
Agile.
tested
Like,
ourselves.
oh yes, do you know the amount of bias
Of
that is
course.
introduced when you test
Yeah.
your thing yourself? It's unbelievable. Even when the developer said, "Oh no, the project manager just tested that," still biased because it's his project, her
Yeah.
project,
Yeah.
and put them away. You need to bring a person from the outside that hasn't worked in your components or
Exactly.
integrations or product, whatever, and let that person to test. Again, that is when the tester, test analyst is essential in any project.
In any project. I
Mm.
think looking back over my time, and I've had some very big test teams under a test
Mhm.
manager. The test managers that I've found the best to work with and the most effective are people that are like an enterprise architect, actually. They can talk the business speak. So they can say to people, not just me as project manager, not just the technical people. This is why we need to test, and this is how we know we're going into testing. Like this is the entry criteria. This is how we know we've done the testing. So the exit criteria for testing,
Correct.
and people that are very clear on that message are the easiest for me to work with as a program manager because I can just go, okay, sure, they know what they're talking about. I've got a clear test plan that they've given me, which I always read. I always read the test plans because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, I'm responsible for delivery.
correct. And that is the test plan is something that needs to be written. Of course, in a high level at the beginning,
Yeah,
and having all this conversation with the stakeholders. Your sponsor, explain to your sponsor,
yeah,
this is the implementation of the product you want, and this is the type of testing that it's gonna need is gonna be required, and
mm,
that you need to make your test lead participate of those discussion at the beginning with the BA
yes,
in the
yeah, yeah,
because the
yeah,
BA also need to prepare all the requirements, configuration, etc. That in a way that is testable. What is the
yeah.
point to produce requirements for the BA that is not testable?
Exactly. I was going to ask you about that too. That quite often in projects too, the BAs are all working feverishly at the start
Hmm.
of the project.
Yeah,
Agile's a bit different, but and then at points in time, the BAs are all pulled back or they've sent somewhere else, right? And
correct.
they've gone, and then you're going into testing. Now, how do you cope as a test lead when that happens, or are you just relying on the documentation being right.
If the requirements are extremely well written, I don't need
Yeah,
the BA because
yeah,
they are clear, crystal
yeah,
clear.
yeah,
But if the requirements are broad,
yeah,
very broad, yes, unfortunately, I need to request the BA assistant. So what do you mean with this? Because
yeah,
this I can test a lot of things here. Ah, yeah, this is a configuration. What is the configuration? There is no configuration available. So again,
yeah,
so unfortunately, half of the time, perhaps more than half of the times, the requirements are not clear,
yeah. That's my
are not
experience too.
are not specific.
Yeah,
Uh, they are very broad. Usually, those you see requirements, and in fact, there are 4 or 5 requirements in one.
yes. Oh, yeah, that's so true. I know that is so true. It
Yep,
should be almost like an absolute statement with a clear entry and exit. I'm going
correct.
into it, I know it is, and I'm going out of it. And just as I'm saying entry and exit, I don't hear those terms used anymore.
No,
I also don't see code reviews done anymore,
oh no,
uh, which is on a big project like you're saying that you're going into the banking industry. And so I've worked in the banking industry to build an ATM network. You
wow,
can't make mistakes, right?
no,
Had 30 people, this is overseas, 30 people on the test team. That's how big it was. Um, so everything's got to be very clear, and everybody's got to work together. And in those cases, in some of those big projects, I've been able to. The test manager is such a senior person and so well able to articulate what's going on that I can take them into the steering committee with me
yeah,
and I think this is a really good thing. The sooner you get your test manager and introduce them to your steering committee so that they can start to educate and build that rapport, I think the better. But it's not what I see either.
no, that is so rare, so
Yep, so
rare,
rare. I mean,
and
people wonder why projects don't work. But I always think all my projects have been successful, and they've been successful, I think, because I've communicated and I've thought about stuff and I've got people involved, and and don't shy away from the hard discussions. If we're getting to testing and there's a bottleneck in testing
mhm,
because other projects are going first, whatever, there's a priority. The worst thing that you can do is say nothing and just sit on it and hope. And then it just makes everything far worse. The better thing to do, I think, as project manager, is to just go and say, well, look, we've messed up here and we should have engaged more with BAU or the operations team or whoever it is. We didn't. But if you do that, again, in some organisations, you have to be scheduled. You have to
yes,
have it, you're in the pipeline. So again, you need to know.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That usually happens with the test environments.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that is when you play a part, essential part in the planning of the testing.
yeah,
When you need to be aware of the pipelines of the test environments. Oh,
yeah.
yeah, especially when you have integrations.
Exactly, especially when you have integrations.
Oh my God, that is just, and it's a big, huge detail. And that is when you need to have this discussion with the project manager. Okay, we have these blockers
Yeah,
for our testing because we need to integrate with such and such,
yeah,
and we can't test when we are planning to do it. We need to wait. Or how long? Oh, let's say a few days.
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
that needs to be considered in the planning
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
be aware of the pipelines. And talking a little bit of the code review, I
yeah.
will tell you, the last time that I saw a proper code review and on where testers were participating was in 2005. That was my last.
Oh, about my last two.
Yes,
Yes.
I never saw again a code review, a
No.
proper code review after that. Never.
No. And I suppose because the way we write code has changed.
Yeah.
But I mean, even, and I did computer science 1,000 years ago, so I could write code. So I used to read a lot of the code just to see if people were writing code cleanly or if they were grabbing code from somewhere else and stuffing it in, reusing
Okay.
routines and stuff, which invariably would break a lot of the time. So I guess, yeah, the way that we do things now has changed a little bit. And we're going to start wrap up shortly, but I was going to ask you two questions. One question, the first one is, do you see AI making a difference to the test environment and to your job in the future?
Uh, Not in the short term. I think there is a very important aspect in AI that will help immensely to the test analyst and testers is
Yeah,
to help to write test cases.
right.
But
Yes.
that needs to happen only when the requirements are well written.
Yeah,
And also the AI can write with errors. AI can make mistakes, even if you pay for
yeah,
AI.
yeah,
There is a factor that a lot of people are aware of is the hallucination factor of the
oh,
AI.
okay.
Yeah, AI can hallucinate, and
Wow.
as a result of that hallucination, you will probably have a bunch of test cases that are not really applicable to your system.
Wow, okay.
So, and also how accurate is your prompt, the way that you prompt
Yeah,
to AI, the
yeah,
way that how
absolutely.
your requirements are written, and the
Yeah,
amount of hallucination or mistakes that your AI is making.
wow.
Yeah. So short
Oh,
term, no, I don't
no,
see it
yeah,
helping much. Maybe in the medium term or long term,
yeah.
yes.
We did a webinar a little while ago about project management in an AI environment, and whether it was going to be still valid. And one of the big takeaways that we had from that was project managers will become more of a strategic advisor,
Mm.
and they need the skills of critical thinking, because AI can do a lot of stuff, and AI can, go through contracts and procurement and things like that. But it's the critical thinking part that AI can't do, certainly at the moment. So my other question to you, my last question to you, is what can a project manager do uh, to help a test manager, generally speaking, in their project?
Allow your test manager or test lead to participate. Allow to
Yeah,
make the uncomfortable questions. Sometimes
yeah,
questions related to testing are uncomfortable. They
yeah,
are not very happy questions for the stakeholders, especially for the
yeah,
VA, because when you are participating from the beginning, you are asking to your VA, what if, what if, what if, what,
yeah,
what if I do this in your system?
yeah,
And the VA says to you, oh, I never thought about it. See what I mean?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, because things change over the course of a project.
Correct. And you are there to place the uncomfortable questions, and that
Yeah,
need to be made. And you as a project manager, I wish every project manager allow to a proper test lead to participate. Because if the
yeah,
test lead is going to participate not making questions, so what is the point?
yeah,
You
exactly.
need to contribute and make the necessary question
Yeah,
to help yourself and help the
yeah,
rest of the team.
yeah. Absolutely. It's like, for the way I see it, it's like a relay. And,
Yeah.
I'm the program director, but I have an enterprise architect and I have an organizational change person always sitting to each side of me, and we work as a team. And then at a point in time, it's the change manager that really takes the lead. It's the enterprise architect, then it's the test manager that comes on board, and they start to take the lead. And the other ones of us, we become the supporters. But I don't think most project managers work like that either.
No, no,
So,
it's a time constraint plays a big part, and
yeah,
unfortunately, that many companies are not producing quality software.
yeah, okay,
You
yeah,
are having a lot of glitch when you
yeah,
use a system yourself as a customer.
yeah,
As a uh, you can I every time I use an app, I see
yeah,
as not because I'm just using it as a user, not as a tester, but
yeah,
I always find something. Always find something.
yeah,
Me as a customer, I don't want to put my money in this if I
yeah,
see a glitch like that.
yeah,
And the more and more I use apps in my cell phone, my smartphone, even in the computer, I
yeah,
always find something, a detail. I know that I'm trained to see
yeah,
the fabric.
yeah,
I'm trained.
yeah.
But it's unbelievable. These companies are producing this. It's like a
Wow,
eh,
that's sad, isn't it?
absolutely.
Yeah,
I was just checking flight tickets in
yep,
a Thai Airways.
yeah,
Is they have a huge reputation, and I
yep,
found a glitch just with a few tap tap tap.
yep,
There was a glitch in the scheduling in their booking system.
yeah. I found the same in another airline just the other day.
Yeah,
I've got the mobile app and it just would not work and would not work. And I eventually had to go via the browser because I couldn't get it to work on the mobile app. So they didn't test the mobile app. That really annoys
correct,
me.
correct. There you go. So
Yeah,
this is the type of software that we are experiencing
yeah,
from the lack of testing. Look
the
at what
lack of
happened with
testing.
CloudStrike.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there you go. You
There
can't
you
have
go.
testing.
Anyway, we're going to wrap up, but thank you so much, Pilar. It's been fantastic. What a great discussion. We could talk about testing all day, really. It's
Absolutely.
such an important subject, I think.
Yeah.
Have you got anything that you want to sum up before we sign off?
Um, uh, if any project manager is watching this or BAs, please keep in mind that quality is one of the important factors in your project. That's all. That's all what I want to say.
Oh, good, good for you. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for this fantastic discussion, Pilar. It's been really, really good. And we're signing off now. So for everyone, have a great project day.
Bye bye, everyone. Bye.